So I think it was Thomas Sowell who said that it is impossible to reason with those who are absolutely convinced of their own correctness. And it seems like that is proven true more and more every day. I was reading an article, apparently, um, Tim Scott, congressman from South Carolina, gave a rebuttal to um, President Joe Biden's joint speech to the joint houses, and and the response on Twitter was to accuse him of various racial things. So again, if you are African American but you're not following the right line of thinking, then you don't count. Just like if you are, you know, if you're LGBT and you don't follow the right line of thinking, then you don't count. Brandon Straka, I think his name was like hugely pro Trump, and really compelling story, and really interesting organization he created, and he got trashed because he was on the wrong side. And we see it over and over again. If you have the wrong idea, if you're on the wrong side, then the tolerance of the enlightened is very intolerant. Joe Rogan the other day got into trouble because he made a comment about how healthy healthy people didn't need to worry about having the COVID-19 vaccine, and a bunch of people freaked out because he dared to not walk lockstep with the intelligentsia. Climate change works the same way. Black Lives Matter. It's all the same. There is this subjective, idealistic reductionism that will not allow anyone to think outside of the lines. And the problem is that we don't live in a world that can be reduced. That there is a irreducible complexity in the world we live in. And when the objective reality of that complexity comes comes up against that subjective reductionism, the effect is always the same. It collapses, and we see that in a very interesting place. I ran across this study um, the other day about mental health, and fascinatingly, among other things, the what it found was that amongst those who self-described as white liberals, they also self-described the highest instances of mental health issues. Roughly 56% of white liberals between the ages of 18 and 29 um, say that they have mental health issues, as opposed to like 27% of white conservatives. But here's what's really interesting: not only is there that much of a span of a difference between conservative and liberal with regard to that, but when you look a little deeper at the data, you find that across the board, people of color who are liberals are actually less anxious. They report less instances of mental health issues than whites in the same political category. And when you look at the distinction between those who are very liberal versus just a little liberal versus moderate versus conservative versus very conservative, although those on the conservative side show marked differences in their self-reporting of mental health, In other words, it's not nearly as high as those who are liberal. The fact is, when you do move to the very conservative from just the regular conservative, you do see an increase. And I'm convinced that that is because, as I just said, when you try and reduce everything down to subjective idealism, whether it's conservative idealism or it's liberal idealism, the more you live in a subjective idealism, the more likely it is that you are going to deal with mental health issues, because the world is not going to bend itself to your ideals. If you are hoping to create some kind of a utopia through your political plans, you are going to fail. And the anxiety and the stress and the frustration that grows out of that is going to wear on you. In Philippians 4, Paul says to be anxious for nothing, but by everything with prayer and supplication, bring your requests to God. And if you do that, and you'll rejoice in the knowledge that he loves you and he's going to take care of you, then the peace that passes understanding will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. We need to stop thinking that we're going to fix everything through our effort. And we need to start realizing that God has a better way. Yes, he wants justice and he wants righteousness and he wants compassion, but we each as individuals take part in that process individually. We're not going to pass laws that are going to suddenly make everything okay. And we're not going to come up with the perfect amount of regulation that's going to make everything okay. And we're not going to figure out who to tax and how to tax them so that we can have the money so that we can make everything okay. There is no freedom from the burden of being, regardless of how much people may try and say that if we could just get a little more money to do a few more government programs, then we could fix it. That's not going to happen. But there's also no way to reduce the amount of regulation and stuff that's out there now to bring back the levels of liberty that this country once knew. And the reason why we're not at those levels of liberty is in part because communities had a difficult time figuring out how to strike the balance between individual autonomy and community responsibility. And if we want to be a part of making things better, then each of us as individuals need to make things better. And slowly things will turn around. If we do it right, if we do it biblically, then what we'll find is that the process, though it may take a long time and it may be hard, it will also result in greater mental health for all of us. And at the end of the day, you're no good to yourself, and you're no good to your family, and you're no good to Jesus if you're stressed out and falling apart. And so that's something to think about. At least that's what's been on my mind. So, shalom.